Timiramnasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Nena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Namashrishtam Manamapi Shachiputramatra Sarupam Shri Rupam Tasyagrajam Urupirim Maturim Goshtavatim Radha Kundam Girivaramaho Radhika Madhavasham Prapto Yasya Pratita Kripaya Shri Gurum Tam Natosmi He Guru Jnanadatina Bandho Swanandadata Karunaika Sindho Vṛndāvana Sinahita Prasida Radha Pranaya Prachara Namam Vishnu Padaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Sarasvatī Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktisiddhānta Sarasvatī Namine Śrī Vaishavana Videvi Daitaya Kripataye Krishna Sambandha Vijnana Daine Pravave Namaha Madhurya Ujvala Premadya Shri Rupanuga Bhaktida Shri Gaura Karuna Shakti Vigrahaya Namostude Namaste Gauravani Shri Murtaye Dinatarne Rupanuga Virdhapa Siddhanta Dvamtaharine Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Shiva Sari Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Gaura Premanande Hari Hari Om. Dinabandhu Prabhu, thank you very much. I was feeling very deeply while you were speaking about how pleased Śrīla Bhaktisiddhānta Sarasvatī Ṭhākura would be to have you sitting here speaking his glories. Although you said otherwise, that you were the most unqualified, but I've found you to be the most qualified in the sense that with his vision, Śrīla Bhaktisiddhānta Sarasvatī Ṭhākura's compassionate nature led him to this vision that Krishna consciousness could be spread all over the world, and that the devotees from every part of the world would come together. What to speak of become elevated, great souls, which you have become, are, and have become. And Hari, sorry, but I'm just telling you the way it is. Hare Krishna. Thank you very much. Dinabandhu Prabhu Ki Jai. And of course, it's not so easy to think about how Krishna, it's easy to think about how Krishna consciousness might spread throughout the world and envelop the Western countries, Paschatya Deshatarine, which was, as Dinabandhu Prabhu pointed out, the desire of Śrīla Bhaktisiddhānta Sarasvatī Ṭhākura, so much so that it was on the tip of his tongue when he saw somebody qualified in our Śrīla Prabhupada at Ultadunga Road. He walked up those steps, did our Śrīla Prabhupada, and said, offered obeisances to a saintly person, not knowing exactly who he was, but before he could sit up, Śrīla Bhaktisiddhānta was already giving him the instrument to the natural thing that we say, what we're thinking about all the time. When we meet people, that's what comes out in our conversation. So Śrīla Bhaktisiddhānta Sarasvatī Ṭhākura was absorbed in thinking about how Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's movement could spread all over the world. And that's why he said it immediately. And of course, saying it and having it happen are two different things. But that's where the exhilaration comes from in life for those who work hard for companies that sell cars. They get a little excited when they sell another car. Profession ultimately in that, sorry to all the car dealers watching. Ultimately, it leads to naught. It's only a material facility. But for those who have the entrepreneurial spirit for Krishna consciousness, and they see Krishna consciousness entering within the hearts of people who were once dead, Asurya namate loka antena tamasabrita tamste bigachanti yeki chat mahanojana. The Shastra declares somebody who doesn't have Krishna consciousness to be dead. And how to bring a dead person alive? Well, that's the great secret that Śrīla Bhaktisiddhānta Sarasvatī Ṭhākura had. He knew how to do it, and he wanted to see it happen. And then he instilled that spirit in the heart of our Śrīla Prabhupada, who said that when he left that place that day, he was no longer the same. He had been surcharged with the bij, this idea to serve Lord Chaitanya's mission by spreading it all over the world. He didn't know how. He didn't know where it would take place, but he incubated that feeling in his heart by the mercy of Śrīla Bhaktisiddhānta Sarasvatī Ṭhākura. And this is the power of the parampara. We find in the Śrīmad Bhagavatam that the power of the devotees is given as the primary way in which the Lord Vishnu's mercy is spread all over the world. In fact, the verse that most epitomizes our Krishna consciousness movement is given by Shukadeva Goswami when he says, Kirata hunanda pulinda pulkasha abhira shumbha yavana kasavaya yene cha papa yadapashraya shreya shujyanti tasmai pravishnave namaha. He names all the people who are grossly unqualified for human society, as defined by varnashrama and acting civilized ways. However, there's long lists of people outside of that context that Shukadeva Goswami mentions. Kirata, Hunanda, Pulinda, that's a list of people who don't have any idea about the goal of life or how to conduct oneself, even so that one doesn't go into the lower regions of the universe. And then he says, however, all of these people can become exalted souls. They can be delivered by the power of Lord Vishnu and coming through the Vaishnavas. And we find in the Bhagavatam also Swayambhur Narada Shambhu Kapilo Manu, that the list of all our Mahajans. These are devotees of the Lord whose vow has qualified them to be an example for the rest of the people in the world. And by their strong adherence to Krishna consciousness in this vow, then that gives them power to give it to other people. So it's a magical occurrence that Śrīla Bhaktisiddhānta Sarasvatī Ṭhākura spoke those words to Śrīla Prabhupada, our Śrīla Prabhupada, and then he felt it in his heart. And then gradually, just as when you water a seed, you see some magic. A seed looks insignificant. It's tiny, it's dried up. and compact, but if you put it in the right place and put water and some sunshine and air, then it sprouts and it then turns into a tree. And that's what happened from the words of Śrīla Bhaktisiddhānta Sarasvatī Ṭhākura, whose heart, mind, soul, everything was fixed in serving the Guru Parampara and passing it on to others. So, Śrīla Bhaktisiddhānta Sarasvatī Ṭhākura had principles that we're following today, that were imbibed by our Śrīla Prabhupada and passed on to us in systematic ways. There are several, but I'll just name three, unless several means three, but I think it means more than three, so I think I'm safe to name just a few that are prominent, and then we can discuss them, because these principles come from Śrīla Bhaktisiddhānta Sarasvatī Ṭhākura, or he amplified them. They come from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and the Goswamis, but they're amplified by Śrīla Bhaktisiddhānta Sarasvatī Ṭhākura. And of course, all of the gurus, Bhaktivinoda Ṭhākura as well. So one of them is a Yukta Vairagya. Śrīla Bhaktisiddhānta Sarasvatī Ṭhākura was an exemplar of Yukta Vairagya, which is, of course, mentioned by the Goswamis in their literatures. Anasaktasya vishayan yatarham upayunjita nirbandha Kṛṣṇa sambandhe yuktam vairagya muchyate prapanchikataya buddhya hari sambandhi vasuna mumukshavi pratyagyo vairagyam palugukhatyate, which means this gives a guidance of how we can conduct ourselves in a material world. We're spiritual souls living here. How can we walk the path that is perfect, even though we're ensconced in material energy? Some choose to renounce the world, and this is ludicrous, as is pointed out many times by Prabhupada, that if you walk into an assembly and then you decide to renounce it and say, I renounce this assembly, or I renounce this Bank of America. He gave that example. It's a laughable statement, because you never owned it in the first place. Every poet or songwriter in history has written at least once a song about the reversals of fortune that take place when you try to enjoy. Are you thinking of one right now? Going through your head? How everything was lost, or how it wasn't what I expected? So what is the path? It is the path of Yukta Vairagya, as given by Śrīla Prabhupada in a brilliant, as are all his sentence within one of his purports, where he says that a devotee is one who sees the entire world, the entire universe, as paraphernalia to be used in Krishna's service. The entire universe is paraphernalia to be used in Krishna's service. And Siddhanta Sarasvatī Ṭhākura, that, for example, he noticed, as Dinabandhu Prabhu had mentioned, that the Gaudiya Sampradaya had fallen into ill repute. People didn't respect the devotees in this Sampradaya because it had become degraded. They had become degraded. And in order to distinguish his Gaudiya Mat from just the imitators of the Goswamis, he made some changes. One of his principles was, we should look better than they do. Just in dress, like there's a few devotees I've seen here, always look really nice. He made sure that his devotees going out into the world looked better than everybody else. Nicer clothes, they had accoutrements. In fact, Śrīla Bhaktisiddhānta Sarasvatī Ṭhākura had used fancy cars that they could drive in, going from place to place. He himself brought some of his disciples even to Radhakund, dressed up in you can see pictures of it, modern, first-class tailoring. Tailored shirts, which was never done before because of a proscription from wearing sewn cloth. But he winnowed out those aspects that are insignificant and emphasized what would expand the interest of people all over the world in and repair the image of the Gaudiya Sampradaya, Madhva Gaudiya Sampradaya. So he utilized anything and everything that could be used in the service of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and we see that in the way that our Srila Prabhupada mentioned many times. For instance, we use all technology. Tape recorder. Said generally people think a sadhu would not touch technology, stay out in wild areas, maybe live in a cave. But it's following the spirit of Prahlad Maharaj, who said, I don't want to live in a cave. I'm going into the city. In fact, I'm going to find the most crowded city there is in the world, and that's where I'm going to live. And that was the mood of Śrīla Bhaktisiddhānta Sarasvatī Ṭhākura. And there we would have, he said, access to people who could take to Krishna consciousness. So much so that he put on events where he would invite kings, he would invite politicians, and he would accommodate whatever dietary preferences they had. In fact, even serving meat in some places. It's known, written in the HH Bhakti Vaibhava, well-researched book by His Holiness Bhakti Vikasa Swami, that some people were accommodated so they would come and listen to Kṛṣṇa-Kathā by one man was a smoker, so he made sure that he had cigarettes available to him. That reminded me, sometimes when we're on book distribution, this has happened more than 2 or 3 times. Somebody's holding something like a cigarette. In fact, this happened recently within the last 4 years. I was talking to someone and they had a cigarette, and in order to purchase the book, they had to do something with the cigarette, and it looked like it could derail the process. So I said, here, I'll hold it. It was a lit cigarette, burning. So when the other devotee saw me holding a cigarette, but I was thinking Śrīla Bhaktisiddhānta would have done this. If other people look at me and say, what'd you hold the cigarette for? It's like, go talk to Śrīla Bhaktisiddhānta Sarasvatī Ṭhākura. He deliberately went out of his way to make arrangements so that everybody could come in under the tent of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and he had full faith that once they did, they would probably never come back out again after they started hearing Kṛṣṇa-Kathā, hearing the kirtan, and getting association of devotees. And we see that's how Prabhupada, of course, strict on principle, but very liberal in applying the practice so that it would attract people to come to Krishna consciousness. This is one of the hallmark or the signature principles of Śrīla Bhaktisiddhānta Sarasvatī Ṭhākura. He revolutionized the spreading of Krishna consciousness by liberalizing, by employing everything, going out of his way to make sure that our Sampradaya, as representatives, were front and center in the world, and that would accommodate people's sensitivities, and they would be able to take Krishna consciousness. Do you agree that that's one of the principles, the Yukta Vairagya, that marks the campaign of Śrīla Bhaktisiddhānta Sarasvatī Ṭhākura?
Yes.
Okay. Would you like to comment on why you feel that way? Whoever said yes? We have an extra mic here. You all don't mind fasting, right? Say no, we don't mind. Thank you. Some of you said yes, you agree. Maharaj?
So we use everything for Krishna's service. We have cars, we have nice temples. So as long as we're using, we know that the ultimate proprietor is Krishna, and we don't use him for our sense enjoyment, and that is Yukta Vairagya. We're following in the footsteps of Śrīla Bhaktisiddhānta Sarasvatī Ṭhākura.
Thank you, Margaret. I think there was an important clause that you included in your statement, and that we don't use it for our own enjoyment. And this is the point of Yukta Vairagya. It's for Krishna's pleasure. And that brings me to the next principle that Śrīla Bhaktisiddhānta Sarasvatī Ṭhākura is known for. I'm trying to present 3 principles that we can take with us today, something practical. So the first one is Yukta Vairagya, and that means in the spirit of serving Krishna, we can accept things, anything, any paraphernalia in the universe, and especially we can do it when we're spreading the Krishna consciousness movement, because that's a great endeavor that requires using all kinds of resources to reach out to people and connect with them on their level. It takes a lot of consideration, and in the process of doing that, anything that's used becomes spiritualized. As Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, just to back up some of these things a little more, Brahmarpanam Brahmahavir Brahmagnau Brahmanohutam Brahmaiva Karma Brahmarpanam Brahmahavir Brahmagnau Brahmanohutam Brahmaiva Tena Gantavyam Brahma Karma Samadhina. I still blew it, I'm doing it again. Brahmarpanam Brahmahavir Brahmagnau Brahmanohutam Brahmaiva Tena Gantavyam Brahma Karma Samadhina. Thank you. So this verse, Krishna says that whatever gross material thing, so-called, that you extend in the spirit that Maharaj was expressing, not for your own sense gratification, but for Krishna's glorification, for his sense gratification, to glorify him, that becomes spiritualized. And the example Prabhupada gave frequently was an iron rod. If you put an iron rod into fire and you leave it long enough, it becomes fire. It's a transformable element, iron. And similarly, everything, according to the verse I just quoted, Prabhupada said that matter is only spirit covered over, and it becomes spiritualized again when it's utilized. So this is one of the main principles of our Krishna consciousness movement. It came from Śrīla Bhaktisiddhānta Sarasvatī Ṭhākura. He brought in the sannyasi clothes. He gave sannyas to devotees. That wasn't done before Śrīla Bhaktisiddhānta Sarasvatī Ṭhākura for devotees in the Gaudiya Sampradaya. They would put on white and emulate the dress of the Goswamis, the 6 Goswamis, that is, of Vṛndāvana, Paramahamsa dress. But he made a couple of points about that. One is that he wanted to distinguish himself from the previous kinds of devotees who had taken on that dress and not held up the principles of Krishna consciousness. He also wanted to show, by giving sannyas, also by giving the Brahman's thread. There's two separate things actually. When he gave initiation, you give a Brahman's thread, and that was something that that was the opposite of what was done before. In other words, when people received the Gayatri mantra or the Vaishnava mantras, they would give up their Brahman's thread that all of you know who live in India you get as a young boy from your father. But to show that Vaishnavism is transcendental, or that they're no longer involved in the Varnashrama, then the Vaishnavas would not use the Brahman's thread. However, Śrīla Bhaktisiddhānta Sarasvatī reintroduced it and said that actually this is proof that when you become a devotee, then you're automatically a Brahmin. This is the process. Aho batashva pachato garyadya jivagrin vartate nama tubhyam te pustapaste juhuvusasna arya brahmanachar nama grananti ete. Devahuti says, oh, how glorious it is that if somebody's chanting Hare Krishna, then they become qualified as a Brahmin. So, in other words, their prarabdha karma changes. So to illustrate that to the world, he gave the Brahman's thread, and he also gave the sannyas order, and he said that we're taking us a step below the Paramahamsa level to show that our subordination to the Goswamis. We don't think that we've risen to that level. We keep ourselves in Trinadapi Sunichena. This was an adjustment that he made, and this could be is under the category of Yukta Vairagya, of utilizing all types of social perception and the way the devotees are dressed. This is engineering specifically to expand the Krishna consciousness movement. You can see how this idea was in the heart of our Srila Prabhupada around mid-70s. Some of the devotees had gone to the Salvation Army. Maybe you don't know what that is, but people give away all their old stuff and they resell it and supposedly use the money for charity. And so a whole traveling party of devotees had gone to the Salvation Army and had traded in their dhotis, not to the Salvation Army, I think they left them home, but they just put on Western clothes. And then they found that they were able to infiltrate places like musical concerts that they hadn't been able to infiltrate before, because when they'd walk and people there's devotees who are now reverting to, you know what that is? You know what a hippie is, right? Hippie is just a noun. It just means that Bhagavatam or Chaitanya can wear any dress needed to spread the Krishna consciousness. Yukta Vairagya, multiple choice is this? To us by Śrīla Bhaktisiddhānta, who through Srila Prabhupada emulated with the same mood for the sake of touching people all over the world with Krishna consciousness, innovate, use technology. Adjust the situation externally so that you can make it available and that people can feel accommodated. Does that make sense to everybody, or is anybody would like to debate the point? Nobody wants to fight. All right. Okay, then another principle. Prabhu wants to fight. Okay, give him the mic. No?
Srila Prabhupada, he said that if I have chanted Hare Krishna under tree, no one would come. Then he want first class prasad, first class dressing the deities, first class kirtan. And like this, he could spread in the West. When you go in the West, for instance, first class prasadam is there. And he spread the movement. This is Yukta Vairagya also.
Very well said. Hare Krishna. Come on, a little more. Give him a little love. A second principle, because at some point there will be revolt if we take too long. But second principle is that Śrīla Bhaktisiddhānta gave this important philosophical point. It's a principle of the seer and the seen. So there's drashta and drishya. So drashta means the seer, the one who sees, and drishtya means the one who's seen. And there's a saying in English, in America, when people say, good to see you. Do you say that here in India? It's good to see you? Okay, 3 or 4 people know it, only. But sometimes people say, it's good to see you, and then the other person says, it's good to be seen. It's good to be seen by you. This is the mood. Śrīla Bhaktisiddhānta Sarasvatī Ṭhākura said, we're not drashta, we're not the seers. In fact, if you read in the Bhagavatam, you find how until the universal form starts seeing, and then the parts and parcels don't see. We're all connected. Mamai vamsha jiva loke jiva bhuta sanatana. So we don't exist without Krishna. We're part and parcel of Krishna. We're maintained by him. Nitya nityanam, chaitanas chaitananam, eko bahunam yovidhati kaman. Everything, every breath we take is facilitated by Krishna. So the mood of the materialistic person who's moving about the material world is that I'm the enjoyer of everything I see. And it's for my enjoyment. I'm seeing it, and I'm objectifying it, and I'm looking at it for my own pleasure. It's mine. There's a big difference between, for instance, a car and my car. Anybody here have a car? Nobody. No Yukta Vairagya going on in here, I'll tell you. You guys, see me afterwards. I know a few good car dealers. It's a bad time for it, though, because the supply is down because of the supply chain. So if you hear a car getting hit outside, which if you listen carefully right now, you probably hear it right out here on the road. If your car is parked out there, it's your car. You're going to probably get up from the class and walk out with perspiration coming down your face. And then when you look out and see it wasn't your car, it was Maharaj's car, then you won't feel so bad because it's not your car, it's not my car. So we objectify everything in the material world. Dhyayato vishayam pumsam sangasteshu vijayate. I'm looking at everything and I'm contemplating. What is contemplation? This is for my enjoyment. I'm seeing it as an object of enjoyment. So Śrīla Bhaktisiddhānta said, this must be switched. You have to become the seen, not the seer. Krishna's the seer, we're the seen. And one of the ways he demonstrated this was, and of course it wasn't just a demonstration, it was the way he felt. When he'd come in to see the deity, sometimes he didn't wear his glasses. And when disciples would try to give him his glasses, he said, no, I'm not here to gaze upon the deity, I'm here for them to see me. He was showing this point. What's more, sometimes he would stand at the back of the temple under the Garuda Stamba, way in the back. And his reasoning that he explained was, when Krishna looks, he'll see his great devotee, Garuda, and then he'll see me standing underneath. And then I'll be seen. So here's the takeaway, if I may. It's an easy one, but it's something you can keep in your pocket, or maybe even short enough that you could make it as a tattoo on your arm and keep this one with you. But Śrīla Bhaktisiddhānta Sarasvatī, Ṭhākura, according to our Śrīla Prabhupada, said that don't try to see God. Try to work and act in such a way that he will see you, or that he'll want to see you. I mean, Krishna sees everything and everybody, but Mahavishnu is half asleep on the causal ocean because living entities in the material world are so boring because they're self-absorbed. But if you want to attract the attention of Krishna and be seen by him, then there's a way to work and act in the world. Atashri Krishna namadi na bhaved grayam indriye sevan mukhihi jivado swayameva spratyada. One of Prabhupada's most frequently quoted verses from the Padma Purana, is it, Prabhu? Padma. In which we're told that we can't see God with our eyes, but if we take a service attitude and we try to serve him, especially beginning with our tongue by chanting Hare Krishna, then he'll be pleased to come and see us, or to reveal himself to us. So this is one of the main principles that Śrīla Bhaktisiddhānta Sarasvatī Ṭhākura taught. And it's compact in this one sentence, and it's something that I remember a lot. Well, not that much, because I don't remember many Krishna conscious things that much, but it is something that I bring out whenever I need it for inspiration. Have you ever felt sort of off balance and you need something to get you started again in your Krishna consciousness? Have you ever felt morose? Good, you're making me feel better now, because I feel like that a lot. So here, one of the ways is to remember, don't try to see Krishna, but try to act in such a way that he'll want to see you. So then I'm properly situated immediately. That reminds me of Bhaktivinoda Thakur's song when he says, Jiv Krishna das e bishwas korleto atukunai. Duk means when the axle is out of alignment with the wheel, and then there's friction, sparks, and even fire. Do you have any friction, sparks, or fire in your life? That's duk. So how do you fix that? By this principle that Śrīla Bhaktisiddhānta Sarasvatī Ṭhākura taught, which is align yourself in service. Just ask this question, how can I be of service? Do you want to ask that? Actually, better yet, turn to the person next to you and ask, how can I be of service? Here you go. Work with me, people. Turn to the person next to you and ask, how can I be of service? Ask. Come on, be more enthusiastic. Javi, did you ask somebody? So how do you feel now? Unhappy? Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, if you want to immediately be free from duk, then align yourself with this mood. Śrīla Bhaktisiddhānta Sarasvatī Ṭhākura said, don't be the enjoyer, be the servant. Be the drishya, the one who's seen doing service. Don't be drashta, the one who's thinking, how can I be the enjoyer and controller? How many principles do we have so far? I have one more to go. I think two. Two principles that you can take home in your pocket, and the third one is called the Brihat Madanga. Śrīla Bhaktisiddhānta Sarasvatī Ṭhākura called the printing press the Brihat Madanga. He saw a new technology, this printing press, previously, and I actually have one at home, a scroll written on palm leaves. what requires to write a book in palm leaf is that you have to have a metal stylus, and you have to press it on the leaf itself to make a mark. And after you've written on one palm leaf and filled it up, you put it in the sun, and it changes the color where you of where you pressed down the metal stylus, and then you get the words. So it takes a while to write these things. But then, of course, through the technological revolution that we've had in the world, the printing press came out, first with a fellow named Gutenberg, who figured out how to make a press to make Bibles. And then the Royal Bible Society, after that, improved upon it. The original impetus was to get the word out to the world about the teachings of Lord Jesus Christ. So they wanted everyone to have Bibles. Martin Luther also used it in his revolutionary style of preaching, and he had some papers that he mass-produced and got out to the world. And there was a marked increase in the places that these went out of Christianity, people reading them. Books actually work. Śrīla Bhaktisiddhānta said that was not lost on him. You'll notice that even scientific concepts like evolution. Are you familiar with evolution? Only 3 people? Have you heard of the theory of evolution? Okay, 6 people have heard of it. Actually, you've all heard of it. But how did you hear of it? It was written in a book. Darwin. Charles Darwin. He wrote a book. You all have it, right? Origin of the Species. You don't have it, probably, but you know the ideas because they went all over the world from the book. It's been translated in many languages. And so Śrīla Bhaktisiddhānta saw this, and he said that the Gaudiya literature should go all over the world, so he was not timid about picking up technology. And when we went to the Gaudiya Math in Calcutta a few years ago with our yatra, best yatra we ever had going to Calcutta, that's my favorite place on the planet. Then we went to the Gaudiya Math, and I didn't see any printing press. I thought I would see it because it's known that Śrīla Bhaktisiddhānta, at least I knew, Śrīla Bhaktisiddhānta Sarasvatī Ṭhākura had put the printing press just next to the deities in the Bug Bazaar temple to emphasize their transcendental nature. Correct? So when we went there, I saw the deities, but I didn't see any printing press. And that's when I started my inquiry around the mutt, saying, where's the printing press? And there were some meetings amongst some of the brahmacharis there. The sannyasi came out and they said, who are you anyway? And you know, and I told them that I'm an interested party, and that when they were convinced, they said, we'll show you something. So they took a few of us up to their museum that they were building. It's probably open now, I'm sure. And on the top floor, we went into a room that was half finished. They were constructing a museum there. But in the middle of the room, there was a printing press that had belonged to, not just belonged to Śrīla Bhaktisiddhānta and his mutt, but he had personally ordered it. And of course, I bowed down to that printing press because of the principle of Brahmarpanam Brahmahavir. It's a transcendental implement. And then I walked around the other side of it, and I looked, and on the side of the printing press, it said Cleveland, Ohio. It was built in Cleveland, Ohio. And Śrīla Bhaktisiddhānta had shipped it over. He had shipped several of them. There was one of the presses that he used to daily produce literature that he would have his students go out and distribute in mass to people. And so he instilled, as all of us know very well, this principle in the heart of his disciple, Abhaycharan Aravinda, our Srila Prabhupada, that as he told him, as Śrīla Bhaktisiddhānta told him in Radhakund, when our Srila Prabhupada asked, how can I be of service? So many others are serving you directly. What can I do? I'm a Grahasta. I have obligations. And Śrīla Bhaktisiddhānta told him, if you ever get money, buy a boat. Right? Get a yacht. if you ever get money, you should invest in candy bar company. How am I doing? Is it multiple choice? If you ever get money, okay, only 3 people know this. Okay, let's try it again. If you ever get money, yeah, that was such a direct and very specific point. Now, when Śrīla Prabhupada came to America, he didn't establish any temples. What's the first thing he did when he got some money? And I just have to tell you, you're all young here. Back in the old days, even back before my days, I only joined the Krishna Consciousness Movement in 1973. Before that, there was no money. It was very difficult. The devotees had very, well, the prasadam was always nice by Krishna's arrangement, but there wasn't a lot of extra money just to buy cars, and that's why we're famous for having, you know, from the old days, really old cars that fell apart. But when Prabhupada did get some money, the first place he bought was on Beacon Street in Boston. And the reason he bought it was because it was big enough, well, because it was a place, and because he could put the printing press there. And in fact, he brought our architect, what's his name? Narayan Prabhu. Brought him there to reinforce the floor of this old building so that Prabhupada could move a printing press in and use it to start printing books. Why? Because that's the first thing that Śrīla Bhaktisiddhānta told him, that if you ever get money, print books. So as Prabhupada came to America, he got some money. What's the first thing he did? He got a printing press to print books. Not only that, he sent his disciples into New York City to apprentice to learn how to do the printing. There were about 8 of them, and they went into the trades to learn how to do the printing. So this was one of the principles of Śrīla Bhaktisiddhānta Sarasvatī Ṭhākura, and you'll hear the echo of that throughout Prabhupada's teachings and his purports everywhere, that he says, I always considered printing books and distributing them to the people more important than building temples. He said, of course, the temples came along, but they were all built really on money that came from our book distribution and outreach. This one, being an exception, Guru Kripa Prabhu and party in Japan had collected the money. Of course, they distributed back to Godhead magazines on the street while they were doing it. So this principle of the Brihat Madanga, and that is to continually increase the volume of the holy name, and that includes printing books and distributing them all over the world, because as Śrīla Bhaktisiddhānta Sarasvatī Ṭhākura said, the Madanga and Kartal can be heard for a few blocks, whereas the book can go all around the world. And Śrīla Prabhupada emphasized this, also observing that if somebody bought a book, it would penetrate an institution or a home, whereas you can't bring the Harinam into somebody's house generally. People didn't invite us in that much. But he saw that the son and daughter of the U.S. president had purchased a book in Washington, D.C., and one would assume they took it home, and there it is. No Harinam inside the White House, but you can send a book there. This came from the inspiration of Śrīla Bhaktisiddhānta Sarasvatī Ṭhākura. So all of us who are engaged in doing this book printing and distribution and thinking, how can we make it bigger? Brihat. That's in line with Śrīla Bhaktisiddhānta Sarasvatī Ṭhākura. He was very much against retiring and going off into solitude to just chant by oneself, because there's a mood of compassion that comes from our acharyas, and that is try to do good for others by spreading the Krishna consciousness movement. So that's the third principle, the Brihat Madanga. So 3 things we talked about, 3 principles. One is Yukta Vairagya. And this is the sutra that goes with it, and that is the whole universe is paraphernalia to be used in Krishna's service, not for our personal enjoyment. Second is be the seen, not the seer. And and the sutra is that don't try to see God, but try to act in such a way that he'll want to see you. And now the third one we can't remember because it's been so long ago since we talked about it. I can't remember what it was. Can you? Oh, Brihat Madanga, yeah. The Brihat Madanga is what really moves our devotees all over the world, because it's a really practical service. You can count how many books are in a box, and then when you get home you can count how many are left. And you can increase. And doing that, seeing how to make it bigger, go wider, this is the principle of the Brihat Madanga, and it's a good idea. It's a really good idea, and it follows in the footsteps directly of Śrīla Bhaktisiddhānta Sarasvatī Ṭhākura. You can be sure that if you follow these three principles and observe them carefully in your life, not only will you be following the parampara through Śrīla Bhaktisiddhānta Sarasvatī Ṭhākura, but you'll also be joyful, happy, you'll have no problems to speak of, and you'll also become extremely advanced in Krishna consciousness. Om Tat Sat. Yeah, Hare Krishna. Prabhu, do we have time for a few questions since we're fasting till death? Okay. Okay, let's have just some discussion, unless you're too compressed to talk. You've been sitting here for 2 hours. Oh, Dinabandhu Prabhu, Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna.
Haribol.
Now we have. I think I have a life member and very dear friend of Krishna consciousness in Dubai. He's convinced the Christians are giving Bibles away free, the Muslims are giving Qurans away free. We should be giving away Bhagavad Gitas. We're building buildings all over the world, but we should be giving Bhagavad Gitas away for free. I have a program we have a program with him in Mayapur. And one of the devotees, he's taking free Gitas that this man donates and gives them to the villagers around the temple. And he sends videos, and they're so happy. And he has a headache trying to get BBT to give him discount for this. But we have so much money, we build all these big temples, we should be flooding the world with Bhagavad Gitas as it is. Hare Krishna.
Get Bhima on the phone.
That's the next step. We got money, let us give books.
Get Bhima Prabhu on the phone right now. I know this gentleman, I talked to him also, and I tried to broker a deal. So far it hasn't come through, because there were, anyway.
It's also important
yes.
the fact that whoever is in the street contributing in any way possible, it's going to be benefited. And I still recall your story about you being in the street, finding one person who had only a lighter. Will you take just 30 seconds to...
Well, lightning struck twice, because I was in San Francisco about 5-6 years ago for Black Friday. You know what that is? That's good you don't know. It's the biggest shopping day of the year in America. So we were out distributing books on the street, and I met this young couple who are sort of footloose and fancy-free, means they're kind of like hippies. So then they were very interested in the book. In fact, they sat down on the sidewalk to look at it as I was showing them. This is what hippies do. And so they were looking, they said it was great, and I mentioned the donation. Now, when I ask for a donation, I always say it like this. I say, we don't sell it like in a bookstore. We only take a donation. We don't need the money. The only reason we ask is when you give something in return for spiritual knowledge, it connects you to the previous teachers who have passed it down painstakingly over many generations, and allows you to enter deeply within the knowledge. So I told them that, and they appreciated it, as most people do. And they said, well, we don't have anything except for, and they went through their pockets, and they pulled out a cigarette lighter, and I said, I'll take it. Because which principle is that? Yeah, it could be Brihat Mridanga also. So, yes, Prabhu?
Prabhupada says, well, we distribute free books also. We have subsidized university.
No, I'm not against free books. I'll speak up for free books too in a minute, but let me finish this one. So I accepted the lighter, and I gave him a Bhagavad Gita for the lighter. And somebody came up to me about an hour later and they said, can we get the lighter back? Because they realized after a while that they kind of needed it to smoke whatever they were smoking. And I took that lighter home and I cleaned it as well as anybody can clean anything in this world. And I used it for many years till that lighter ran out for my puja. And every morning when I would light the lighter, I would think, as Tavi Prabhu was pointing out, this person is getting some benefit from this. And the same thing happened just recently when we were in Wales. And there were about 10 devotees standing there, and the guy was smoking a cigarette on a break. And lightning struck twice. I took his lighter from him, and for a minute he wanted it back, but I convinced him that it was probably better if we use it in the temple than for his smelly cigarettes. And then he agreed. And so we can take things from people so that they'll appreciate it more deeply, was your point, right? Havi Prabhu? And Maharaj, I'm sorry I cut you off, but I just wanted to finish that lighter story.
I just raised my hand. I didn't mean to cut you off. Prabhupada says, if we give books for free, they will not value it. And he gave an example. It's like if you're giving out mangoes, and they will say, oh, this is very sweet mango, but they will not take it. But if you ask a little bit of donation, they will value it. And they will say, this must be sweet, so let me buy. We also give free books, like to schools, like we have Surabhi Palayantam Swami. He donated like 700 sets of Śrīmad Bhagavatams. And we were distributing books to all the schools and universities around here. So if you give something for free, they will not really value it that much. So we're just asking very minimal.
Yeah, well, this is should I keep going, Panchagoda? Okay, so this principle, I guess let's discuss it for a minute, because money is it's a token. It's a way of exchange that's socially accepted. That I have a piece of paper that says that somebody somewhere is good for this. I'm going to back it up. May or may not be true at a certain point. So that's an exchange, and it's something people value. So as an example, sometimes if I'm talking to somebody and they show an interest, even for a minute or two or less, and then they don't have the wherewithal to give something in return, like money, then I'll ask if they want to read the book, and they'll say yes. And then they may even complain and say, well, I can't give anything for it, and so how can I take this? That happens a lot. And I reply that you just paid attention. And your time is more valuable than money anyway. Money just represents that you took some time somewhere else. So you just gave your time here. Point was that, and is, that when we're careful about the context and how people get them, and we can develop context. For instance, at the Los Angeles Rath Yatra, we give out little packets with books in it. And it's a different context because people are enamored of the Rath Yatra. They're seeing all the devotees dancing and singing, and then when they get a packet, they feel they've got something really valuable that connects to this experience they had at the Rath Yatra. So generally they keep it. But does everybody keep the books? No. And back in 1974, we asked Prabhupada, at least we, meaning the Sankirtan devotees, what to do about people who bought books and then left them or threw them away. Because I can tell you, up until 1977, we insisted that everybody give something, or at least $5 for a big book. But then, sometimes after that, Panchagoda knows, Prabhu knows, they would just leave them, for instance, in airports, and we'd buy back maybe 5% of the books we sold. So we told Prabhupada, sometimes people are throwing away the books after they buy it. And Prabhupada said, what would he expect? In Kali Yuga, people throw away their own babies. So they don't understand the value of something. They used to steal books too. It was a sport people had because we were just kids and we were trying to sell books, and they thought that they would pull a fast one on us, grab the book out of our hand, or as soon as we show it to them, they just claim it as theirs and then walk away. And we complained to Prabhupada about that too. And Prabhupada said 2 words, lucky thief. So I think that, with a little engineering and intelligence, we want to invite people to give large or small sums of money, see me afterwards, for increasing book distribution. And it's becoming a bigger and bigger avenue, people sponsoring books and then having devotees go out and place them in hotels, motels, hospitals, and things like that, and people are reading them. I'll give you one more example. During the pandemic, the thick of the pandemic in California, in Silicon Valley, we were doing a lot of books online, but this really got into a book distribution ceremony. I don't think Śrīla Bhaktisiddhānta Sarasvatī Ṭhākura would mind. But one of the ways that we did it was we made a little door hanger pack with some cookies and a Bhagavad Gita and a few other books, and we'd go hang them on doors because nobody was making contact physically at that time. Everyone, no vaccine, everyone inside, nobody making contact. So several people called us and said, you can't do that. Just hang. What a useless activity, hanging books on doorknobs. But we have pictures to prove it, physical evidence. We got a cascade of letters and cards coming back to us, thanking us for reaching out to them during the pandemic and giving them prasadam and books. They didn't know they just cookies and books. And we also made devotees from those door hangers. We have the people to prove it. They came directly from the door hangers. So, there are certain principles we follow to guide us, but we always have to look and see how to adjust them so we can give the most mercy to the most people. We don't want to be careless or nonchalant about giving the books out, that's for sure. But we do have to be flexible as possible. We'll take just 2 more. Yes, Prabhu.
Hold on.
Speaking of technology, we have a mic for you down here. This is Yukta Vairagya at its finest.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Prabhu, nowadays the technology is changing. So whether we should still stick to the printing books or some other means to be?
No, we should use everything. In fact, in my wallet, back in my room, I have a couple of cards that have a little code on it. And if you give the card to somebody, they're empowered to just use the code, and then they have a digital book. And we did that also during the pandemic, because digital books were not that utilized because we're so consumed with paper books, which is good. But we also got together with the BBT and did extensive reorganizing of the digital library, especially for America, because there's particulars involved, especially Amazon and the bigger organizations that make it virtually impossible to go around. In any case, we were able to then very successfully over the phone sell lots of of digital books. There's also audio books coming out. His Holiness Kesha Bharati Maharaj just completed the entire Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita in audio, and that's going to be published soon by the BBT. I will add a caveat, and that is worldwide, paper books are holding their own. About 15 years ago, people thought, or industry, those interested in the printing industry thought that what would happen would be that the digital industry would outpace the paper printing, because they just thought, well, it's a trend, that why wouldn't people just take it digitally and it'll just keep growing? But as it turns out, there's an aesthetic about books, paper books, that people appreciate, and they're not giving them up. In fact, they're more than holding their own. That's a general statement, because there are pockets, like there are young people that don't read at all. They just scroll like this, and they look at things for 10 seconds, a minute maximum, they move on, so they don't even know what a book is. So yes, everything can be utilized wherever we can print it. It's, you know, writing is just an abstraction of speaking. That's all it is. And so we're taking kirtan and we're writing it down, and then it's a delivery system, is what a book is, or a digital. So we're interested in the delivery, not in the package that it's in, particularly. Whatever works, we'll do it. What do you think? Would that match Śrīla Bhaktisiddhānta Sarasvatī Thakur's mood? Whatever works, we'll do it. Let's ask Dinabandhu Prabhu to make sure. He was thinking the same thing. Haribo. Wait, we want to hear what he says.
Like Smarhari said the other day, this temple went through 3 revisions before it came out the way it is. You know, Prabhupada was going to make it like Radha Damodar, with rooms all around everywhere like that. And then he started, you know, money started coming in. He says, "Oh, let's make it like this." Then more money came in. He said, "All right, let's make it like this. You know, make some other place for, you know, everything else."
Nice.
Have a kitchen over here and go down over here and this and that, all inside the temple, and then you just change. So Prabhupada's not carved in stone. You know, he's adjustable on certain points. Yeah?
Innovation.
Innovation.
Thank you, Prabhu. We had one more. Yes, Prabhu.
I was in Australia, then one devotee said, Vaisheshika Prabhu said, take books, 1, 2, go into the car, 3rd, give books. And we did it. 2 devotees, we take books, we took some books, and we took the car, we went, and we distributed books, and we collected very, very nicely. Then you are an acharya of the Brihad Mridanga. Vaisheshika Prabhu ki jai.
I don't know what you said I said, but it sounded like I said, take some books, go out and distribute them. If that's what you said, then that's true. And I do think it's a good idea for everyone to follow in the footsteps of Śrīla Bhaktisiddhānta, who Prabhupada told us was extremely pleased when even a so-called insignificant brahmachari in the mutt would go out and sell a 1 paisa paper, a written paper about Krishna consciousness. Then Śrīla Bhaktisiddhānta would take the time to glorify that person in front of everybody. He also told his sannyasis and muttbasis that every day they should go out and knock on at least 3 doors. And he said, even if the people don't take, they'll still think, oh, there was some spiritual person here, and they'll get credit. And then he said, when you get denied, or people object to what you're doing, or they even berate you for being a devotee or for distributing books, then he said, you get chid rakta, spiritual blood, for your chid sharira, your spiritual body. In other words, while you're in this world, take full advantage of it, because you only have a few years. Take it from me, it goes by fast. And you get a little opportunity, a window of opportunity to do this. And Śrīla Bhaktisiddhānta says you get spiritual blood in your spiritual body by going out and having people not appreciate you. So that kind of makes it a little easier, right? Say yes. Yeah, makes it easier. Okay? Any last thing, or do you want to sit? Yes.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
When we were discussing about how books will always be an attraction, I remember one line that you've written in one of your books where books are nothing but Krishna in the form of paper and ink, which touched me a lot, and I kind of, when I share this thing with, when we go out on book distribution, it does appeal to them. So just wanted to share that.
Yeah, it's like a deity. It's where the eternal meets the temporal. You know, the deity is Krishna directly, but everybody knows the deity's made of marble. But Krishna now is manifest there. So in the Vaishnava Shastras that we're distributing, we're actually distributing deities to people. And they're full of spiritual idea seeds. And when those go out into society, they start to grow. And that's how ideologies, whether they're political, economic, or spiritual, get inculcated into society and people take them up. It's generally because of books. In fact, the entire America now, you can trace it back to the Revolution, and the Revolution was started, say historians, by a book written by Thomas Paine, still the highest selling book per capita of any other book in history, that everybody in the colonies, that's what America used to be called, the colonies, bought it and read it. And because of that book called Common Sense, amazing book, what a writer, if you ever want to read some good writing. He sold that book throughout the colonies, people bought it, and that's what made them strong enough to rise up and revolt. So for all of us, we want to be these dynamic spiritual warriors, just as Śrīla Bhaktisiddhānta Sarasvatī Ṭhākura was, right? Is that what you want? Come on. I'm still a little, you know. Yeah. And so we can do that by Śrīla Bhaktisiddhānta Sarasvatī Ṭhākura's mercy, and we can cause the most damage to Kali Yuga, the most damage per capita by distributing books. Because once it goes out, it's the Briyat Madanga, it's there, and it lingers. Some of these books, the paper they're using, like Brahma Muhurta Prabhu in the North European BBT, he uses special paper. It's not only ecologically sound, but it also, it holds up. It can last as much as 300, 400 years. So just keep in mind that when you distribute one book, it can last for many generations. In fact, you may distribute the book, you may leave your body and take birth in the same family that you distribute the book in, so that when you get there, the book's already waiting for you and you didn't miss anything. So do it for yourself if you don't do it for anybody else. Okay, now we're just biding our time, but is there any last thing that you want to say? Yes, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
I've been distributing books for the last 30 years.
Haribo. How do you feel?
I feel great.
Okay, you
just
look
like
great.
you. And I've been hearing about you, and you are my role model. So I go out every day to distribute books in India here, but I have a little problem with my color. When people see my color, they provoke me. They say I'm Kalia, I'm a snake. So what should I do?
Well, generally we find that every circumstance has a key that can open it. And what I found, my experience is, oftentimes when there's some obstacle, seeming obstacle, it's the doorway to a new innovation that opens things up. And first thing to do is to look for that key. what is the way to use it? Like comedians, when they come on stage, one of the ways they get the audience with them is they bring out the obvious. Like they'll say, or they'll talk about themselves, maybe in even disparaging ways. Like they'll say, you know, I'm a real loser, and I went to school, I dropped out, and you know, everyone starts laughing because everyone appreciates self-deprecation. So my point is, whatever people perceive, if you go with it, and you augment that, and I don't have it right in the top of my head. I have to go out with you, and you know, we could talk about it. But I know that there's always a way to figure out what's the key to open it up. I'll give you an example of what I'm thinking about. Not in your particular case, but the general principle. And that is, when we did yatras, we do yatras down in Jagannath Puri. And so most people speak Oriyan or Bengali or Hindi. And we brought with us in the last yatra devotees from Japan and China and some from America. And very few of them spoke Hindi, Oriyan, or Bengali, what to speak of English. And we had a job to do, which was to distribute at least 5,000 books. And so let's say the Chinese had to do it. And so they could easily say, look, I'm Chinese, I know nothing about Bengali or Oriyan or Hindi, so let's not try. But as it turns out, there was a key, and it's actually easier to distribute a book when you don't speak their language. And the reason is that we use these language cards. It's a card that has, it says exactly, it's a sutra, it says exactly what you need to say to them. And when somebody who's Chinese walks up to you in Oriya and you don't speak the same language, and they hand you a book in your language and then hand you a card that says what it says, they know that you know that they know what it means. And therefore, there's no getting out of it. It's either yes or no. But if you knew a few words, they'd pretend like, I don't understand you. So it's better you don't know anything. And so that was a workaround. Workarounds bring turnarounds. And you just go with it and learn around it. So I've always found that if there's a trend happening, you try to lean into it and make it your asset rather than something that is delimiting. And I'll meditate on it more. Hare Krishna. Okay? We should end now, right? Because it's time. But I'd just like to point out and maybe reiterate that I think that the fact that this turned into, at the last third of the presentation, a book distribution seminar, I think that's appropriate. I didn't really intend to do that, but I think that it would please Śrīla Bhaktisiddhānta Sarasvatī Ṭhākura, that all of you pleased him by that. What do you think? Okay.
Vaisheshika Prabhu.
Yes, Prabhu.
I think we're going to arrange here for you to do another class, because you're here for some days, right?
Krishna willing.
Yes. So this is very inspirational all over the world. This is going on with training and inspiration, and this is the mood of Śrīla Bhaktisiddhānta, this is the mood of Śrīla Prabhupada, and this is everybody's mood now to spread Krishna consciousness. So Janardhan Maharaj will arrange for you to do a...
If I may just point something out.
Go ahead, point it out.
Panchagoda Prabhu is a great hero, actually. I mean, he's a heroic figure. I remember one time, I was in the San Francisco airport behind a little booth distributing, and I saw him come barreling down the hallway because he's a formidable figure. And he had been in Los Angeles, and he had this determination just to go down there during the marathon. And he distributed like 100 big books a day. I mean, I'm just giving that as one small example, but he's been doing that for decades. And then coming here to Vṛndāvana and taking over the leadership of the temple, this is something that, I mean, it's not only in his spirit, but also because of his heroics on Sankirtan, it gives him this fortitude to handle this kind of project. It's a huge endeavor to be here all the time and to deal with meetings and all the other kind of everything else going sideways all at once. And only somebody who's completely integrated in Krishna consciousness could do that. So thank you, Panchagoda Prabhu, for holding space for all of us here in Vṛndāvana. That's it? That's like half. Come on. Hare Krishna. Thank you.
You're our hero.
Let's not get started now. Śrīla Prabhupada ki jai, Śrīla Bhaktisiddhānta Sarasvatī Ṭhākura ki jai, Gaur Premanande Haribo. Vanchakalpadrishta Kripasindabhevacha Patitanam Pavanibhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Nanta Koti Vaishnavebhyo.